Welcome back to the Intel this Sunday afternoon. I'm in conversation with Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba, who is one of several candidates campaigning to be the next ILO Director General, minus the support of South Africa. Prof, let's open the new file now, the file about you and your campaign. Why the ILO? Why do you want to be its Director General?
You know, Thulasizwe, what people don't know is that actually I've been in the ILO now for about 12, 13 years. It's a labor of love. I fell in love with it. I got there by accident. I was never meant to be there. I was there as a replacement for someone else that came from Business Unity South Africa when he was suddenly employed by the ILO, in fact. And over the years, I then ended up really engaging in this tripartite nature of the ILO. And I think other people who might be listening, the uniqueness of the ILO is that amongst the family of UN entities, the multilateral space, the ILO is the only one that works on a three. It works with trade unions, governments, and business. No decision is made without these three finding consensus. I got, the more I stayed there, the more I engaged with it, more we prepared for the centenary celebration. You will probably know that in 2017, I was appointed as the Vice President for the International Organization of Employers and consequently the Vice Chair of the ILO. And the International Organization of Employers has 150 business organizations in over 150 countries and represents just over 50 million companies. So I, as the global spokesperson, was representing together with my team, representing all those companies within the ILO, and the first since, again, 1919 at the time. Now, as we move into this candidacy, what people don't know is that in 2017, I was asked by Minister Oliphant, she sitting at the G20 with a few colleagues from the Department of Labor, as it then was before it was Employment and Labor, asked me to please I avail myself for this position. I said no. She pleaded with me, and some ministers and ambassadors from Latin America also pleaded with me, until I said, well, let's wait for the centenary celebration in 2019. I'll think about it. Now, more specifically, eventually I came back and I said, okay, I'll do it, because I was happy with the centenary declaration that we adopted in at the centenary of our organization. And the reason I would want to do it now going forward, other than already having told you that it's a love affair. I love being there. I love the fact that it is consultative. We work on a consensus. We work on this tripartism. And for me, it gives me joy to be able to see the processes we follow to come to a resolution and have the conventions and the standards that we use throughout the world.
Prof, part of the declaration you allude to that you adopted at your centenary in 2019 has to do with the reality of the changing future of work. And no period, I guess, has underscored just how much the world of work is changing than the last 2 years, right? This whole talk about the gig economy, working from home, casual workers and freelancers. And I saw a recent article, for instance, that was criticizing that in some of the policy decisions, countries such as South Africa still think of work in the old sense, in that you will have an employer who employs people, and this employer will be, nudged and pushed and sort of convinced to have benefits for these people, including pension benefits, etc., etc. And the authors of this article were saying, actually, that's no longer the dominant nature of work anymore, and it has an impact on the policies that governments adopt?
Well, I think you've said quite a mouthful and all very important. Let me first take it back to the centenary declaration. I think it's important for people to know, and I would enjoin your followers and the audience to perhaps take a quick sneak onto the ILO website just to look at what this centenary declaration says. It's a very short document of about 4 to 5 pages. But what is critical to know is that it was done pre the COVID, without knowledge, of course, nobody knew. knew that we would ever have a COVID. But it was important that for the first time in the history of the ILO, we have productivity as a very central key component of this document in an official instrument of the ILO. It's mentioned in this instrument about 11 times. And I mention this because you will be aware that in South Africa, I chair Productivity South Africa. I was appointed previously by the Minister Oliphant. Minister Nxesi, when he came around and it was renamed, asked me to make myself available, and I made myself available. And why do I mention this? I mention this because as we hit the COVID, we had already indicated, for example, here in South Africa, that the name change of employment and labor already indicates that you need to change the way you do business. But we have continued for 3 years doing business like nothing has changed. This is in spite of the fact that Productivity SA, my entire team, has sent numerous emails, numerous documents to the department, to the minister, to say, hey, we need to change the way we do things. You can't proceed in terms of the Employment Services Act as if we're still a Department of Labor that is not supposed to create employment. Remembering that Productivity South Africa, for example, is supposed to contribute to all creation of employment, all retention of employment, competitiveness of the country as well. We started saying policies need to change. South Africa, for example, that you talk about, in the middle of the COVID, you will know that Uber drivers, as an example, e-hailing, could not claim from the UIF because they were not recognized as registered workers or employers or whatever you may want to call them. Now, as employers themselves, as self-employed people, it's a travesty that you could have thousands and thousands. I mean, Uber in South Africa has numerous drivers who were taken by surprise by all of this and who could not support their families. But secondly, a country like South Africa or Nigeria or Guatemala or Colombia or anywhere, India, we have so much informality, between 65 and 95% informality. And what do? For many years, we talk about we need to transition all the people in the informal sector into the formal sector. Now, whilst we can try and transition people, assuming that they want to be transitioned, my view on it is that it's very patronizing to assume that without consulting those people and knowing that they do want to be transitioned. For me, what we should be doing is finding a way for them to eke out a living in their informal setting, but taking care of what it is we worry about. What do we worry about? We worry about social protection. We worry about how are we going to have social protection for people who do not contribute into the coffers of our security and the insurance that we have. What also do we worry about? We worry about them not contributing to the infrastructure that they use without having the funds to maintain it and so on. That, for me, does not mean we must not be looking for innovative and creative ways of approaching informality differently. And the reality of life in South Africa is that we talk about a very small part that is highly industrialized, which would be what is historically white business, what is historically large business, but we don't represent the SMMEs. We don't represent the people in informality. We don't represent the people who have been losing their businesses in dozens, who've been losing jobs by the thousands during the COVID. So for me, you know, as Einstein once said, or it's attributed to him, it's insanity when you keep wanting to do the same things and hope for different outcomes. And we've said this as Productivity South Africa. We say this in the ILO. The COVID response in the ILO also talks about this, and which takes me exactly to the fact that all the leaders of the world have said, even though when the Centenary Declaration was adopted, nobody knew about the COVID, but the Centenary Declaration document is seen as the most opposite instrument to respond, to ensure resilience, to ensure sustainability of economies, to ensure that we keep jobs and create jobs. But there is no way a country like South Africa going forward is going to create jobs. Our unemployment, which sits in the 30s, is going to go into the 40s because no one listens. No one wants to hear. Instead, they get upset with you when you tell them the truth. Instead, they go around telling people that you are arrogant when you tell them the truth. This is the reality of why people are upset, because people don't want to realize that young people, marginalized people, all kinds of people in informality and so on, throughout the world, including South Africa, we are never going to change anything unless we change those policies, as you rightly mentioned, Thulasizwe.
Yeah, Prof, I don't know if I've got much time. So let me ask then, maybe in about 40 seconds, having outlined all of these issues you just did in the last few minutes, how then will you, as Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba, convince countries like South Africa and others with different structures of governance and political systems, etc., the world as varied as it is, to move progressively in the directions that you've been pointing at?
Well, my role is to lead. And if you've seen my campaign document, I talk about building an ILO that cares and delivers, and I talk about expecting to have a collaborative and collective response to build a better, stronger world. And the key word here is collaborative. The other key word that we must talk about, which is not in those words, is tripartite. For me, mine is to steer. Mine is to lead. But I am very clear that the only way this is going to happen is through consultation, is through robust engagement, but it needs the social partners and governments. And one has to present the ideas we have. One has to present how we transition so that our people remain with decent work, remain with dignity. And the only way to do that is to upskill, reskill people, and ensure that we introduce productivity to be the core of everything we do, so that we can talk about continuous improvement, what the Japanese call Kaizen. So that's 40 seconds. I don't know if I still have more, but a lot more I can say, but that's my 40 seconds.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your insights. And I can safely say you've not been arrogant in this interview. If you are arrogant, you hit it very well.
Thank you for confirming that you haven't seen any arrogance on my...
Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba, he's a candidate for the position of Director General of the International Labour Organization.